world, and welcome to another episode of the Crisis Victory Show. My name is Dr. Hal Bradley. I'm your executive producer and host of the show, and today we have a very special guest on the show, a retired former ATF agent, Ignacio Esteban. And this is an interesting Ignacio that I've really been looking forward to doing with you. Thank you for coming on the show.
No, Hal, thanks for having me on the show. It's it's exciting. It's always great to talk to different people with their backgrounds, and I've done these shows now for a few years now since I retired. And I also do a weekly show. We're taking a little hiatus. Give a shout out to William Steele, and also give a shout out to Tim McBride for making this happen also.
Yeah, I love Tim. Isn't he great?
Yeah, we did a show together with Bill Stacks a few years ago, and it was fascinating conversation. We've also kept in touch, and unbelievable journey also for himself.
Yeah, he was pretty amazing. Both of us were international smugglers at the exact same time in history. And, you know, when we're off the air and we're visiting about all those old days and stuff, we always think of the fact that someday we'll be in our 80s sitting on a front porch in a rocking chair and people will be wondering why we're smiling and have a gleam in our eye. and it's all attributed to the journey and the time. And, you know, during our years, Ignacio, when we were involved in doing illegal transportation of narcotics into the country. That was the 70s and the 80s, and marijuana was not so important. We didn't feel it was destroying the country, although, you know, in retrospect, you look back to the mistakes you make in younger years and realize that these things did affect the country. Yeah. And as you know, my story briefly, in 1993, I walked into the U.S. Attorney's office, and I was the primary target of Operation Northern Exposure at that time. They had initiated a multi-agency task force to take down the Sinaloa drug cartel's largest cocaine trafficker in the Northwest, and that was me. And I had a high-ranking officer on payroll, so I had information coming into my organization at the time and kind of knew that they were getting close, but still didn't have me. And what turned me around was the birth of my child, and looking at him. And Ignacio, I didn't want to raise him up in that. And by then I had built a pretty good life for myself and my wife. And so I flew down to Culiacan, sat down at the table with some of the bosses and agreed to carry over the industry for them to send somebody else up in representation so I could bow out and get away from it. And yeah, they told me, yeah, hugs and handshakes and everything's wonderful and whatever. And I get back home to a third of a ton of cocaine and 2 soldados sitting in my driveway at my home where my family lived.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, awesome. It was. And because of my status, I was able to feign federal heat, turn them around, got the load out of there. And the following day, I walked into the U.S. Attorney's office, and it absolutely blew them away. Having a drug lord, a kingpin, come in of his own free will.
And that doesn't happen often. No,
it doesn't. And over the course of the last 30 plus years from the time I walked in, I bonded deeply with a couple federal agents who ultimately both became SACs of their offices.
Oh, they? Okay.
Yeah, a lifelong love to both of them. We worked in multiple foreign countries doing very dangerous work, and they were always supportive. They weren't judgmental. They saw a guy that said, enough is enough, and decided to right the wrongs in life. And brother, that was 31 years ago. And I'm just, it's an honor to have you on today. Because of 17 years, 17 years undercover, I've worked with just about every alphabet agency the government has out there.
So you worked with ATF a little bit then, huh?
Oh, yeah. There's a guy named Chuck Customeyer. He retired from the ATF also and became a screenplay writer. And the movie that's being considered right now for production about my life story, Chuck Customeyer would tell me back in the 80s, I would see your name coming across down there in Mexico because he was operational in Mexico at that time.
Oh, in Mexico? Okay.
Yeah, and I was around during the time of Kiki Camarena, may he rest in peace. Rafael Caro Quintero, I knew when I was a kid. Chapo Guzman, I knew him when we were in our 20s. I've got pictures of all of us back in those years. And this is before they became powerful drug lords and did the things that they did, how they came up.
They were definitely before my time, but interesting also. Do you want to give me a little background about myself a little bit for the audience?
Yes, absolutely. That's what I was building to.
Okay, gotcha. I started in, and I think you see the poster behind me. It's ATF Undercover. That's the cover of my book there. And the poster, I almost called it the accidental agent because I really wasn't. I mean, I watched Miami Vice growing up. I mean, I grew up in Miami. I'll give a little back to my family. Born in LA, raised in South Florida, in Miami. My family came from Spain. Esteban is Basque.
Wow.
They're Basques. My family was from Galicia, Canary Islands, and also Catalan. And they came to Cuba, right? And unfortunately, with the communist revolution, Castro and his cronies, Che Guevara and all that, they lost everything there. And they weren't supporters. They weren't communists. They were capitalists. Were very successful people. They had no interest coming to the United States at all. They loved Cuba. Cuba at its peak was doing extremely well at par with the United States. It was the Casablanca of the Americas.
What era was that, Ignacio? What years?
They came in the early '60s. They came in early, but this started in the Castro Revolution started in '59, and Batista, he was a dictator, he was a strong man.
Yeah.
But this is saying sometimes better the devil you know than the devil you don't know, because people
Exactly.
he was corrupt, typical Latin America, right? He still let you function and live your life. This guy Castro, it was a different beast. And when they start nationalizing and taking everything, as to the mafia, they weren't talking about Castro either. They lost quite a bit there. When you had the Meyer Lanskys in the world losing everything there, and Traficantes, and it was tough for everybody. And they nationalized. In essence, he became the ultimate mob boss, controlling everything. Yes. So, fortunately, the United States, they came here, and I was, like I said, born in California, LA, raised in Miami, and a lot of Cubans. A lot of people don't know. A lot of Cuban Americans in South Florida. Tons. It transformed the whole region. It became the gateway to Latin America. So, law enforcement is always like in the back of my head somewhere. Growing up early 80s, I was a young kid, maybe 10 years old, right? And watching Miami Vice, Don Johnson right there. That was pretty cool in South Florida. Has a nice Ferrari, cool guns here. Always going, man, that's pretty cool. But I think it's television. That won't ever be me. Well, no, years later. So I went to college up in Tampa area, St. Louis University, Catholic University, by the Benedictines. A degree, and I love politics. I've always loved politics. A degree in poli-sci in history, and I was working on my master's in international relations at FIU. People who know Miami is Florida International University down here in South Florida, and I was going to go to law school. That was my plan. I'm going to go to law school. I accepted to Michigan, Lansing, Michigan, but something came up in the mid '90s. Microsoft Windows 95. And that changed everything, the internet, pretty much. You had dial-up and everything there. And I started finding a lot of jobs online. And I started researching stuff. So I started putting a lot of these Fed jobs in there. And they needed people, because law school was going to be expensive. I was going to have to pay. I didn't get a scholarship. And back then, it's still $30,000 a year. Or I can start making some money. And I was an athlete. I had played collegiate sports. I had a scholarship for tennis. Very fit guy, good runner. My dad was a gun enthusiast. I knew how to shoot weapons. So I said, maybe customs wouldn't be a bad idea. So I put in for in the mid-90s. They needed Spanish speakers, and I did all this online. This is something, revolutionary. None of this was ever done before. With the old time with the paper and the want ads, all that. This is all being done online. And I taught myself how to do it. I taught myself what email was. I taught myself, because it really was so new. I just started getting into it really quick in the mid-90s. I was early 20s myself. So I just taught myself all this. And from there, I put in the position. I went through the interviews. A few months later, about 6-8 months later, I was picked up because they needed people who were bilingual, who could deal with, I think in Miami International, MIA, 90% of the flights will come from Latin America. So instead of dealing with interpreters, they wanted the customs officials to deal directly with the smugglers, right? The passengers they were dealing with, because there's a lot going on. Not just from the outside, but from the inside. It's unbelievable what's going on. MIA would open my eyes with some, unfortunately, corruption, not only from the outside, but within the ranks also. And I'm going to tell you some stories what happened at the airport there. So now we're looking at the mid-90s. Colombian cartels are still strong, right? And they're still pumping the drugs through transshipment countries, through the Caribbean, right, to Florida, or through planes. And they would love to get it through the airplanes. That's a quick way to get in there instead of taking the slow boat out there, right? You have a 747 from South America, Colombia, Peru, Ecuador, what have you. I mean, I remember one seizure I had on the SET team, because eventually I would become a member of the elite customs team called the SET, the Contraband Enforcement Team, and we would make some of the biggest seizures in the country at that time at MIA, Miami International Airport.
Amazing.
it wasn't uncommon to see like 600, 700 pounds of cocaine that was in the huge grouper coming in from Ecuador. You have a block of ice next to a kilo, right next to another block kilo and a block of ice right there. And all this stuff wasn't going where it's supposed to. It's going to get ripped off. So when it comes in, out the door it goes without being cleared properly. So there was massive amount of corruption. Now, I expected that going in. I wasn't, you said, okay, I expect corruptions with the ramp workers. I expect corruption was going on. But then I didn't expect corruption within the ranks. And I was young. I was maybe mid-20s. And I was maybe less than 6 months on the job. I went from going to law school to being on the front line of the war on drugs.
Wow.
And you're seeing a lot, but I didn't expect my supervisor to be dirty. I didn't expect the other guys to be involved. And what were they doing on the weekends? And they will be caught in a major sting. Was those who know Miami, you have Miami International Airport. You have a smaller regional airport called Tamiami Airport. That's what it's called at the time. I think the name has changed, Tamiami Regional something. And those were the small planes coming in, those. So on the weekends, he would go out there with guys from the local police department, Hollywood police department, and clear a load coming in with 300 pounds of cocaine coming in, right? They will take it out themselves, and the police will escort him back to warehouse they would have set up. So this is some major corruption going on. Unbeknownst to them, that internal affairs already had the whole place wired up, and they were watching the whole operation that was going down. They did it numerous times, and this is one of your supervisors. So that's pretty shocking, and that's happening here in Miami. So the coke's coming in South America, it's getting cleared illegally by dirty customs officials, and it's going for distribution pretty quickly.
That's amazing. That's just amazing to me. And,
it's shocking. It's appalling, right? And when we saw them, I remember when he got arrested, and I remember some of the other guys, and the customs agents, because we were like the inspectors at the time,
right.
Working at the airport. My authority was at the airport and the areas around there, foreign trade zones, seaport, etc. And to see them belly change and escort through the concourse, that's for 20-something-year-old. That's pretty shocked. Guys you were working with are now being arrested for being drug traffickers and working with these organizations. And
what an awakening for you. Coming to law enforcement, to have that trust. I'd like to cut in at this point on this just for a moment. I spent 17 years undercover working with multiple federal agencies. And, they've got things that are set up now in such a way where that's almost non-existent anymore. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I've had agents tell me that how things are now checked, double checked, triple checked. And this keeps the possibility of an agent becoming influenced by a criminal organization and activating. There's things that are set up now that we didn't have back in the 70s and 80s and even the 90s.
Yeah, they get
and thank God.
Yeah, you need to. But unfortunately, if you go and just check up the news yourself, just Google it, you'll see agents getting busted all the time. And
I do.
Officials get busted, yeah. So you can just Google and check it out. But unfortunately, the technology does help, but it also makes them a little more savvy too on both ends.
Yes.
One thing I say, you always need to have a good moral compass. If you don't have that going in, you can get swayed very easily, because when you see all that money being flashed at you, just to look the other way or do something that you're not supposed to, and then here's 10% of this, that percentage, or here's a Rolex, you got to know what's right and wrong. That's black and white, and that's one thing I've always had. I mean, like I said, I grew up in Catholic schools. My parents, I give them credit for them. Very good moral values. Taught me always right from wrong, and you got to have that. You got to have that, because if you're in that kind of business and not having it, you're going to end up, and you'll be that guy being escorted through the concourse by internal affairs with the belly chain and everything else, the shackles and everything else all throughout the airport. And people are like just shocked watching that. And
how did you feel? How did you feel seeing that? How did it impact you?
Impacted me a lot. I mean, it made me disgusted. I was shocked. I said, man, we thought these guys were good guys, and I thought they weren't. And you'll see more and more cases like that down the road. Not just that one. Later, on the set team, I'll have my trainees working, and one of them, and I don't remember all the exact details, but I'm just paraphrasing from what happened. After I left going to ATF, I heard that he would use his position to try to smuggle. Let's say you're traveling, right? Yes. We are allowed to carry weapons with us and assist the air marshals as a force multiplier. So we show our credentials, we go through the badge and everything else, but our bags don't get checked. And he was taking kilos to I think it was Puerto Rico. So
unbelievable.
People want to abuse the authority they have. They want to abuse the public trust, and they turn out to be scumbags. And you see a lot of these guys out there like that, and they deserve to get what they get. They deserve the time to get stuff like that. So I was working with in there in customs, and we're talking about smuggling. Since you know a lot about smuggling, the one that really bothered me, because I also helped before I went on the set team. I did some of the work on the rovers, so the guys in plain clothes at the airport.
Yeah.
And some of these guys will swallow the pellets full of cocaine or heroin.
Yeah.
And then they'll have their gut full of that, and then they got to pass it, right? That's awful. That's awful.
It's unbelievable what people are willing to do for money, and it's such fast money and short-term money, and the risk is so high. And in a case like that, where they're actually swallowing those capsules of narcotics, those break open, they're dead. I mean, is it
a lot of them do? We get calls to DOAs, especially heroin that leaks in, inside you. You're done. It's pure heroin. You're cooked. Yeah, and people do it, and some of them, I understand they get forced into it because the cartels have that kind of power, and they want to get the drugs in there, and they'll force these people to do it. They'll extort them, they'll hurt them, they'll do whatever they can, and I became good at that too, and it was easy quickly to detect these, and it's the whole process. I mean, when you find someone that's like that, man, you got to take them to the local hospital out there. They got to get them X-rayed. They got to get them laxatives. You could be there for days and weeks. Someone just passing. Some of these guys can be filled up with hundreds of pellets inside them.
Yeah, it's frightening. It's just absolutely frightening and devastating. And when you really think of it, you were just talking earlier about how you were getting hundreds and hundreds of kilos on drug busts. Heck, these people aren't bringing in but a kilo, maybe a kilo and a half or something inside their body. It's a small amount of money, a small amount of profit built in that structure, and they're facing death. They could die.
They definitely could die, and they get serious time. Their lives are destroyed.
Yeah, it's horrible.
It's just an awful situation. I saw a lot, but sometimes they load up these planes, and I'll be honest with you, we maybe get less than 10%.
Yeah,
you get these planes from South America, and especially from Cali or Medellin, and they could be loaded, and it's hard. I mean, these guys, it was relentless in the 90s and 80s. I wasn't there for the 80s, but what I saw in the 90s, it was absolutely relentless. And we're limited, what we can do, and it's even easier to get stuff out. So once you want to get your profits and money out, it's even less. It's it's harder to catch those guys too. So there's a lot of, unfortunately, we check less than 1% on the cargo coming in and out. So these guys play the percent, and they play that into their profits. You probably know this.
Oh, absolutely.
They accept that. They accept those losses. They accept those losses.
They do. They plan for it in advance. They know it's coming. They don't really care at all because they've got so much of it to move and so many different avenues of moving it.
Yes.
So many corrupted people like myself, for instance. I grew up in a village in Mexico as a child in the 60s. And after my military service, I went down to visit my village. And when I was there, I got recruited into taking a carload of marijuana into the United States. And I made it successful. And I said, oh, wow, this is it for me. I'm going to love this. And
how did you smuggle it in, Hal?
Well, what I do is I had a Ford LTD at the time, my first car that I used, which is what they told me to get. And they had a chop shop down there that put the compartments in it. And you're talking 1974, 1975. This is before we had any kind of extensive border protection that we see today. Yeah. And I smuggled all the way until 79. I did my first plane trip down into Mexico in 79 in northern Sonora, about 200 clicks north of Hermosillo. Had a guy bulldoze down an airstrip for us, and I'd did a canyon flying between a reservation that the Yaquis had that was half in America and half in Mexico. So we had we had an access point getting in and out of there. And at that point, that's when cocaine came into my life. And after that, I did a couple flights. And when I got back up there with it, they said, we don't want to put you at risk. We need you to develop markets. And that's that's what the Sinaloa drug cartel did with me. And like I told you earlier, I knew Chapo when Chapo was around the marijuana business over in Jalisco before he got to the appointment that he created for himself in Sinaloa State. He was born in La Tuna. He was born in Sinaloa, but he was working when I met him. There was a guy named Rafael Caracantero. He was a major marijuana dealer just outside of Guadalajara, and they had a ranch out there we would go to. when we would buy up what we could in Durango State and need more. And by that time, I'd recruited other guys in college that were taking cars down. And
Oh, wow.
gee, oh my God, I had a hell of a thing going there for a while. But when they pulled me out of doing the smuggling and said we need you to establish, the markets for us up in California, Oregon, Washington State, into Vancouver, Canada, which became my biggest market for them ultimately. But that's what happened. They transition, they educate and transition.
And transition, make money. Money talks, right? Money talks.
Well, and responsibility changes too. I've witnessed executions, stood right there and watched people get horribly killed.
It's awful. And those are things you think about. That's awful. You have to,
Well, you carry that the rest of your life. And part of my walking in on my own free will and willing to take on the Sinaloa cartel, a faction of it, I should say, was based primarily on the inside of myself, my conscience. I just couldn't live with that world any longer. Marijuana, Ignacio, was one thing, but when cocaine came in, it was no more hugs and handshakes. It was automatic weapons and death threats every time you were doing anything in that organization and witnessing.
Coke, heroin, fentanyl, it's all awful. Awful now.
We didn't have fentanyl in my years. I've been out of the trade 30 years. I'm a pastor now. I've been a pastor for 26 years. I work in the home. Yeah, I love it. I work in the homeless communities. I work in trap houses. I work in the very environment that 30 years ago I helped create. And it's just my way of giving back.
Giving back. That's good. And you're also an author too, like I am, right? You like to write a lot.
Oh yeah, I've got 12 books in publication out there. I write action-adventure novels, and I always dedicate my books to law enforcement people that I've worked with in the past.
That's very nice.
These people are people that put their life on the line for the nation every day of their life. And most of the work I did, Ignacio, wasn't in the United States. I worked in a lot of foreign countries. I was operational, and I would insert agents in to organize crime syndicates and things to this nature.
No, dangerous work, no doubt. These people are dangerous people, and I know that from firsthand, and also all my research and writing. I got close to 80 books, short books on Amazon.
Wow!
And,
Congratulations!
Of course, my autobiography, ATF Undercover, and then I've also, and that's where it started. I guess started in the pandemic, but I want to get back to ATF for a second. But I also have about 120 articles on medium.com. I've written a lot there also. They have 100 million users. So I've really became like a prolific writer after I retired, which I retired a few years ago. And it's really exploded. I love self-publishing. And if you're a writer out there, author out there, a little advice, go to Kindle, Amazon, self-publish, get away from the gatekeepers if you're having issues with publishing companies, and do it yourself and get your work out there. That's
you learn, don't you? It's a process. I've been through the losses and done all that.
I don't do that anymore. I edit. I do everything myself from A to Z, from soups to nuts. I do it all. So
I started editing after my third book. That's self-editing. But by then I had connected with a guy that was really good in publication, and he walked me through the journey. But you're right. It's better to do it yourself. You're the one living it. You're the one reviving it, if you will. Sure. And how can you put that in somebody else's hands and let them try to?
Especially they take a big percentage, right? And then they own it.
Oh yeah.
Well, thank you.
Well, as you know, with Amazon, out of every $10, they take $7. But they also print the book, they package a book, they mail the book, they do everything for you. And if you got the numbers, you can do okay with it. Right. But anyway, getting back,
I do a lot of digital stuff. Digital, the numbers are reversed. If your books are digital, I keep 70%. They only take, I mean, a little more actually. I think a little more than that. 75%. They keep 25%. So if you do digital, everybody does everything digital now. You don't want like paper. You keep most of it yourself.
I'll look into that. Thank you for that tip.
Yeah, think about yourself. Do everything digital, and you make a lot more money. You keep a lot more. So just if you're a writer, just think about that, since that's what we're doing now. Going back, so customs in the 90s, seeing a lot of things. You got the corruption side, you see the smuggling side.
Yes.
But I'm also networking a lot. And people who don't know, we don't have everything's subject to search. We have what they call a custom seizure authority, search authority. So if you come from international, you're subject to search to make sure you're not bringing drugs or anything else illegal or outbound. A lot of times they like take money, smuggle it out. So there's a lot of things to look for, especially in Miami. We're really, really busy. But I also networked a lot. And I wanted to expand my authority, expand what I'm doing. So I said, next step is to become an agent. And unfortunately at the time, customs, and then we were still called customs then, because before after 9/11, things would change. And with customs and the Department of Treasury, the agent side didn't want to make inspectors agents because that would be a burden for them. So I said, okay, that's fine. Now I'll start looking for DEA, ATF, FBI, Secret Service, because we would always be networking with these guys making seizures. Sometimes I will seize a guy with tons of counterfeit currency, right?
Yeah.
Oh, guess what? He was coming from Latin America. He had American counterfeit currency and counterfeit credit cards with the numbers taken off, stuff they're going to do. I mean, everybody had a scam. And I would encounter all these different scams from all these different locations. So I network with different people and say, are you guys hiring? Yeah, we look. So I look up online, boom, boom, boom. And the fastest one picked me up was ATF. So I said, okay, I'm going ATF. And I was fortunate enough that at least they didn't send me to the Southwest border. They didn't send me somewhere, to New York City or, San Francisco or LA. Like I said, I went to school in Tampa and I ended up going to Tampa. So my old stomping.
Perfect.
Yeah, that worked out well. I knew the area. I still stayed in Florida, which is nice for a lot of different reasons. Close to family, the weather's good. I don't have to pay state income tax. What money I make. All the good things. Where other places you get taxed a lot more. So that's just something else to think about there. So I went to ATF. Now I didn't just go into undercover work. That's something that you have to really learn from.
That's what I wanted to ask you about. I'm curious. So you've done some undercover operations.
Oh, I did a lot. Yeah, I did a lot of undercover work. But you don't start from the beginning. That's something you have to get your feet wet, right? You got to have to gradually work you up from basic cases to medium cases to bigger cases. What does ATF do? What's ATF? Well, ATF is the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives. And I was with them 21 years. And with Customs, I did 5 with them. So a total of 26 years of federal law enforcement when I retired a few years ago.
Did you ever work out of the Miami-Dade office, Customs office down there in Miami? Are you?
I was part of the set team. So I worked out of the airport.
This is going to be interesting to you. The SAC of the Miami-Dade office was the agent that I originally met when I walked in 31 years ago. He became the SAC and he retired out of there in 2018. Were you around? Were you around at that time?
I was with ATF in Miami.
Yeah, he was in Miami-Dade office. He was the SAC. I don't want to say his name out of respect,
No.
but knew him for 30 years. I mean, I absolutely love the guy. We built his career working in different foreign countries together, and just an amazing. He should be writing a book. But anyway, I have a feeling you might have known him. We get off air, I'll tell you who he is.
Oh, okay, that'd be good. That'd be good. So, but before I got to Miami, I was still in Tampa. I would stay in Tampa about 12 years. I worked as an agent there, and one of the guys I worked with, and I'm not his name, just call him Carlos. I call him Carlitos. He was called him the Puerto Rican bullet catcher, the Puerto Rican bullet catcher. He had an amazing shootout. And he'll be my training officer, mentor, and then we become partners working cases together. Back in late 80s, I think 87, right there in Hialeah, near the Westland Mall, he was effecting an arrest, and he had a SIG 9mm, 6-hour 9mm pistol. The bad guy had a 6-hour. He didn't know this at the time. Had a 6-hour 9mm pistol. And when they went to effect the arrest, the SWAT team. Here's the car in the front. He's there in the front, and the SWAT team is in the back. He pulls up in there. The guy opens up, and he had his gun out there, and his firearm, his pistol through the muzzle takes a round inside. He doesn't even know what happened. So he cut the bullet with his firearm, with his handgun. He cut the bullet right there. Boom. And he's trying. Remember, he tells me he's trying to pull the trigger. Nothing's happening. And then he realizes what happens. But the SWAT team is right there to save him and takes care of business with this guy.
That's amazing.
Yeah. I mean, remember he had the gun in a plaque, and I saw it.
Wow. Well, he earned that title, didn't he?
That's like 1 in a million. He later, when he retired, he did a little show for Ripley, believe it or not. And he talked about that. So you can see that out there. Catching the bullet, man. He said that was his birthday right there. He was born again. Just think about it. Look what your gun is. If that's not there, where's that going? Right to your face.
Oh, yeah. You're done.
That's bad news right there. Man, unreal. So
God had a play in that. God
He's a lucky guy, and we would work together, and I learned a lot from him. So I developed my own style. There's always guys that talk a lot. Some guys don't talk enough. My style is right down the middle because, like I said, the jury wants to listen to them talk, what they have to say. They don't want to listen to you talk. You're the undercover. They want to listen to what they're up to and what they're saying, how they do things. So I always good enough to say enough and let them talk a lot so it plays well with the jury. Everything I did was always recorded. My success rate, prosecution rate, was I think I only lost maybe one case, 99.9% chance, and it wasn't even my fault. So I was really good at making sure these were people that were actively involved, what they were doing. This is what they do, right? If it's between, well, what does ATF cases do? Well, they deal with guys who are, firearms traffickers. These are guys that are armed home invaders, armed drug dealers. I mean, we deal career offenders, armed robbers. These are guys who are the worst ATF goes after, because these are the people who cause the most harm, and repeat offenders that we want to take off the street. And those are the guys we go after. And I made a career doing that. And taking a lot of these guys off the street. So I learned a lot from that. And I did 12 years in Tampa doing a lot of those cases. I didn't look like this, Hal. I didn't sound like this. My English was broken. I wouldn't sound like a guy, like a Tony Montana type that's been in Cuba, maybe 10 years, right? Yeah. My hair was long, had a big beard. And I can deal with all kinds of people, from Hispanics to blacks to non-Spanish speakers. You name it, I dealt with all kinds of people, and those are all walks of life. And no one ever said, ever, hey, I think you're a cop or you're a Fed. They were like always doing more and always saying, hey, why don't we do bigger deals and bigger and bigger and bigger? And I let them talk.
Well, it's like you said, it's progressive. Undercover operations become progressive. As you gain knowledge, you learn how to expand that knowledge. Like I told you, I spent 17 years undercover working with various federal agencies. And I remember full well when we first started out. And I mean, they had to train me. And here I am, a former smuggler, high-level narcotrafficante. But there are certain procedures you have to do if you're setting up for prosecution. Countless times I wore wires. Countless times I would insert agents that would be wearing wires. We would go through the high-risk scenarios together. And that's why, like I was telling you earlier, I dedicate my books to the agency people that I've worked with, because I just have such a great respect for the people like yourself, Ignacio. When you're undercover, it's life and death. I mean, it really is. And there's no pulling about it. They can get less time shooting somebody than they can getting busted with a 500 to 1,000 kilo load with a record behind it. There comes a point in time when life is meaningless to those type of people. It just becomes meaningless. And
a lot of these people, some of these people are psychopaths, right?
Definitely.
Life has no value. Life has no value, and they're involved in this culture, and they've done time, and you know what it is. And sometimes they say, I don't want to go back there and do another 15, 20 years. I'm just going to shoot it out and see how things work out. So you got to be on your feet all the time, thinking, looking at these guys, playing the role, because it's a role. Like I said, it's a different education that I had. Like I said, I went to Catholic schools, right, and then I beat them at their own game in their backyard.
Yeah, I love it.
And I got a lot of satisfaction out of that, because when I was done with it all, shaved up, cut my hair, cleaned up, right? And I'm dressed here, and now I'm doing
and looking good, brother, for 53.
Thank you,
well,
sir.
I know that Pete kind of briefed you a little bit about me. I was kidnapped in Culiacan back in 93. I was undercover going down to meet a general in the Mexican army that had 3,000 kilos that he had acquired from the president of Mexico's brother. Really a high profile case.
Wow.
And I got blown off the road en route to the airport. I had 2 Mexican nationals with me. We were grabbed, bagged, tied, and taken to a site for interrogation. I was actually rescued out of that site, but I remember, they had a gun to the side of my head, and they kept pulling the trigger, and they were beating my body at the same time. And I heard the screams of the men that were caught with me, and then they went silent. So I know they were killed. But
you know what happened to those guys? Yeah,
they were killed. But they wanted. I was grabbed by crooked Mexican federal agents on the payroll of the cartel.
Oh, I see.
And what they were trying to do is find out just exactly what I knew. And I never told them a damn thing. I took the beatings. And then I hear crash, bang, English-speaking voices. The next thing I know, the bag's pulled off my head. And I'm so beat, you couldn't even recognize my face. And this guy's got my picture in a plastic card, and he's shaking my shoulder saying, "Are you Hal Bradley? Are you Hal Bradley?" And I was so overwhelmed. I was just crying. I couldn't talk.
You thought that was it? Yeah.
Yeah, I did. And later I got captured down in El Salvador, inserting an intelligence officer from the Salvadorian government into the MS-13 organization. And we were captured and spent 7 weeks in captivity. And I'm not going to go too much in detail about what happened to us, but when we were rescued, the team that came in and hit the camp where I was at, killed everybody in the camp, got us, unhooked, unbagged. It was just horrific. And the guy's name was Manny. He was the agent that I was inserting into the MS-13. And I had been in Leavenworth Federal Prison and made a friendship with an MS-13 general while I was in there. And what he had done is he had written a letter down south and had my name in the letter. So when I was operational in Mexico, I come out of the embassy in Mexico City, and I'm met by two intelligence agents that were out of El Salvador, and they said, "Let's take you to lunch. We want to talk to you."
Yeah.
And they convinced me, I said, "We'll give you $75,000. We need you for 2 days to do an insertion. We want to put an agent into their organization." Well, when we got down there, unknown to me, the agent was identified immediately by MS-13. They knew who he was.
Oh,
So when we went to the restaurant to meet up with my friend, the guy that I'd been in Leavenworth with, he wasn't even there. We got taken down, knocked unconscious, bagged, thrown in the back of a truck, and the next thing you know, we're in what they call dry camps. They were moving us almost daily because they knew just exactly what was going to happen with regard to the man they had in custody. And this was a very serious intelligence officer that I was inserting in there. But before we went out and made the meet, we had made the story up in the event of captivity or something happening that I never knew he was a cop. I thought he was cool. I was just introducing a friend to a friend, and that's how we played it off. So unfortunately for him, he took on a lot more of the brunt than I did. And I mean, we were beaten every day, but they were doing other things to him besides that.
Did he survive?
I don't know. When they came in and hit it, they put him in one helicopter. They put me in another. I never saw Manny again after that.
Oh,
but the point is this, and what I'm trying to say, Ignacio, is this is why I have such a respect for men like you that put your life on the line and you go undercover in these operations. Mm-hmm. And it takes a specific type of personality to survive those moments, because anything you say wrong, any neurolinguistic activity, your body responds in a different way. These cartel people that I grew up with and came up with, they spot that stuff. They know it, and you're dead. That's it. It's over.
It seems like that would make a heck of a screenplay, and I'll be
working on a movie now.
You're working on one?
We are. Yeah,
that sounds like a heck of a movie.
Well, everything in my life is documented. I was able to keep a lot of forms and paperwork and photographs and everything to back and corroborate the story, and that's what Hollywood looks for when they're doing it based on a true story scenario: is how credible is this guy? Because listen to the story. Yeah, he says he knows Chapo. Well, I've got pictures of me with El Chapo.
Yeah.
He says he worked undercover. Well, I've got documents showing me going into foreign countries. Every single thing that I share on my show and share with gentlemen like you, brother, I've got the background information to corroborate the story. And that's why when I look at someone like you, Ignacio, I mean, my heart is so appreciative, if you will, of the work that you do, because I know how dedicated you are. I know the agents I work with, and I don't remember ever working with a crooked agent. So when you talk about that's amazing. Yeah, I trusted with my life the men that I worked with. And, well, they came up when I came in. These were young Greenhorn agents from DEA and U.S. Customs, and those are the primaries that I had an SRE number with or an SA number with.
Yeah, unfortunately, there is corruption. Unfortunately, there is corruption.
Yeah, I'm aware of that, but I was blessed in working with people that weren't. I've worked around the CIA down in Central America and in Mexico, and you want to talk about corruption? That's a whole nother story. That's a whole nother story, brother. But they're also doing what they need to do to defend the sovereignty of the United States of America. So I have hats off to them and the choices they have to make and the risks they go through. And I don't know if you've had any involvement with the CIA outside of the country, but man, I mean, it's a whole different ballgame than working with ATF or DEA.
I wanted to work in Mexico at the end of my career. Like I said, I was in Tampa, and then I went to Miami, and I worked a lot of firearms trafficking cases. We joined forces a lot with locals and in the state agency, Florida Department of Law Enforcement. Trafficking. Then I promoted. I went to, at the end of my career, went to headquarters, and I promoted. So I went up there and I did my time up there. But different in Florida, but I was interested in going international branch with ATF. But with Lopez Obrador, and he was awful in my opinion. I've written about Mexico, and I've written about the CJNG. I written about CJNG and the corruption and things going on. He was not a big fan of U.S. law enforcement. He revoked diplomatic immunity. He didn't want us armed. He didn't like cases being investigated at his time until
what era was that, Ignacio? What years?
This just happened. He was president. I want to say from Scheinbaum just took over, so he did 6 years. So I think we started around 2018, maybe 2018.
Wow.
Yeah, he's awful. That guy was awful. Like, he's a socialist. Lopez Obrador is an awful president, and that's the reason why I decided to retire. I wanted to work in Mexico or in El Salvador, and I was going to do all that. But with what I've seen, the corruption, but it seems like the new president of El Salvador, man, with the way he's handling, and he saw me with the president, the way they take care of MS-13 with these super Mac.
Amazing, isn't it?
They're not playing. They're not playing with these guys.
No, they're not at all.
Deserve.
And people want to go back home to El Salvador now. Now they're looking forward to rebuilding life down there, and I think that's beautiful. And
that's beautiful.
I was in Folsom Prison in the 80s. I was in Leavenworth Federal Prison in the 90s. I've been in high-level prisons. I get it. It's very, very hard. But the unfortunate part, Ignacio, is it's not as strong as a deterrent as people think it is. When you come out, if you're reconnected or approached by the people you used to work for, you know that there's no options other than something like what I did, where I said, screw you, turn that load around. And I walked into the U.S. Attorney's office, knowing full well I was going to get killed. I knew it. But I was thinking of my wife, my children, and I didn't want to raise my family up in a criminal lifestyle. No, my brothers and sister, Ignacio, all of them have never been in trouble with the law in their lives. They've all been in their marriages between 30 and 40 years, all hardworking people. I'm the only one, and that's because I was sent to Mexico as a child because I got caught smoking a cigarette in 1969 at a high school. And back then they kicked you out for a half a year. And my mother said, I'm not going to have one of my kids wandering the streets. So she had a friend that owned a mining corporation on the Durango-Zacatecas border and said, let's send him down and get him some experience in life. Well, she didn't know that they had massive poppy fields and the Chihuahuas.
Oh boy, you got a different experience in life, huh?
Yeah, I got a different, and I was groomed. I was a child. I was 15, 16, and by the time I got out of the Army, I wanted to go down and visit my village, and that's when they approached me to bring down a specific type of car and got me started. Yeah. And because of my love for the village, my love for the people that loved me, this little güero, this little gabacho, that didn't speak Spanish, never heard Spanish spoken before that time in his life when he first went down there. I was a kid from north of Seattle.
You learned quickly, though. You learned quickly, right?
Immersion. I did. And I had a bodyguard when I was there, a guy named Mimo, and he did speak English. So at least I had one person out of about a little over 200 people.
Translate, give you a little bit of heads up what's going on.
Yeah, but you know one thing about the Spanish people, the Mexican people that took care of me in that village, every one of them, they just loved me. I was invited into all of their homes. So my attachment to the Mexican community down there is lifelong. Great. The love that I have, and seeing what the cartels have done to a country that I absolutely adore has been heartbreaking.
Oh, it's heartbreaking. Yeah, I just wrote an article about that on Medium about Mexico's latest House of Horrors, where it was in not from right outside of Guadalajara, because you know that CJ&G, El Mencho Cervantes, and are really rivals with Sinaloa, and it's a battle for Guadalajara there, and they're awful. And they just have these different. They're Sicario training grounds where they take these indigenous people, they bring them in there, they massacre, they teach them how to kill different ways, and have all these bodies, and then they bury them, they get rid. I mean, it was awful. It's like 300 dead. It's a house of horrors how they kill people, what they do to these people there. And hopefully Claudia Sheinbaum steps up more, decides to cooperate more with the U.S. and decides, because I know the tariffs was.
She's doing a great job, in my opinion. I'm so proud of her. I mean, my God.
She's doing better, yeah. She's better than him, that's for sure.
Yeah. Oh, well, yeah, of course. But I mean, the risk to her own self going against these cartels.
Oh, my gosh.
She's a target of interest for any of them. And she knows that. But she's doing something for her country, that wonderful country of Mexico.
First female Jewish president in the history of a country, 90% Catholic. That's unbelievable.
Absolutely, it is unbelievable. But God uses all of us according to His glory, not ours. And I'm just hoping that we can see more of an American involvement down there, because, like you said, I remember when agents got their hands tied when the laws were changed in that country, and they just. Absolutely. And that was after the Kiki Camarena era. But even then, they were under a lot of restriction. I was in Guadalajara bringing marijuana, just outside of Guadalajara, bringing marijuana out of there when Kiki got grabbed in the 80s. I was there. I was down there.
That's awful, man.
It was very awful. And I left that country, and for about 8 months.
Didn't they behead him? They cut his head?
No, they tortured him, horribly tortured him. And I don't know. It it was one of the beginning of the changing factors of my life of just exactly what I'd gotten myself involved with. Because all my life I've respected law enforcement, even though I was on the other side. I've never ever disrespected any police officer or anybody. If you're doing something and you're caught and you're wrong, go pay your price. Step up, be a person, and accept what you did, and try to become better as a result of that experience.
Gotcha. Right.
When I was in the feds, Ignacio, I became a certified hospice counselor for my fellow dying prisoners in Springfield, Missouri. I entered seminary and completed 2.5 years, and my classroom was in the death rooms of my dying hospice patients. That's where I did my studies every day and every night for 2.5 years. It was very humbling. And then I got transferred to Leavenworth from there to finish out my time. And that's when I got approached by the DOJ and said, how about we just drop your sentence, make you a contractor? And 17 years later, I walked
17
away.
Working. Wow.
17 years working undercover. But, when you say you're sorry, it's one thing, but do something to be sorry and show the world that I truly am sorry. And I look back today with no regrets of captivity, torture, everything I've gone through.
That's good. And I think with Trump here classify them as a narco terrorist group, that's a game changer now.
That was brilliant.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah. Whether you're for him or not, what, we both took an oath. When I entered the Army, I took an oath to respect,
defend and protect the Constitution against enemies, foreign, domestic. Absolutely.
Foreign and domestic. That's exactly the same oath I took. And to obey the obedience of the President of the United States, whether you agree with the guy or not. He is your commander in chief, and that's just the chain of command and how you learn to respect. So, I know that we're so divided right now with some people that are for him, some people that are against him. But what we need to do, instead of worrying about red and blue, is we need to worry about the red, white, and blue.
That's right.
And come together in unity. And God has a significant play in all of this. As you know, I'm a pastor. My love is to all of his creations now, and saying I'm sorry isn't enough. You have to get out there and actively show how sorry you are.
Yeah, do something.
Yeah.
I think with our fentanyl crisis we have, and so many people addicted, and so many people dying, we have to change the course, because we had a pretty much open border policy with the previous administration, the Biden Harris administration. That's why it was infested with gangs. Now look at everybody leaving because nobody wants to be put in El Salvador or Gitmo or wherever else they might end up, and they're just leaving themselves, which is good because hopefully we can see crime come down. Look at these Venezuelan gangs; they're awful. They're awful. What's going on here? So
it's beyond awful.
Get the gangs out, get the cartels in check. Use every asset we have to rein this in and make this a better situation for all of us, because the previous administration really was lame on this, and they let the other countries bully us around. So it was wrong.
Well, you know what, Ignacio, this is one thing that you and I agree with, because we both worked in law enforcement for decades. We both have an understanding of just how impactful these cartels were to America. And when they imposed where they said they're now terrorist organizations, I smiled, because I know what's going to follow after that, and so do you. This is going into war. It's going to be a war. And the cartels today may think that they can get around it and find other avenues and resources. I don't think so. I think that this is a game changer. And it's going to be interesting to see what the next year or two bring. And hopefully unification between Mexico and the United States.
More. I think somebody can work well.
I do too.
It's good. I like her. I like what I see with her.
I do too.
Smart.
Yeah, it's quite a journey they're on down there, my friend. So let me ask you, now that you're retired, are you just going to get into book writing and that, or what are you going to do with your retirement time?
Right. So far, I've been doing a lot of podcasts. I think I've done hundreds of shows. So if you like this conversation, you can find me. You can go to YouTube, type in my name, Ignacio Esteban. I did a weekly show with William Steele. He had a popular reality TV show, Inmate to Roommate. We've done a show for about 2.5 years. We took a little hiatus now.
Excellent.
We get back on that. So I've really been doing a lot of shows, writing a lot. Like I said, 80 books on Amazon. You can find me on Amazon, Ignacio Esteban, where I can talk about my autobiography. ATF is also on Audible. I had a professional voice actor help me with that. Excellent job. I have dabbled a little bit on screenplays. I had the software. I've done some screenplays, working with some people, because I have a lot of good ideas, my experiences with that. So if it's something you like also, please reach out to me also. You can find me on Facebook, LinkedIn, find me at Ignacio Esteban there. And I'll be more than happy to share what I have information and working, or anybody else, I'll be more happy to do shows like that too. But right now, I've enjoyed my retirement as a prolific writer. I think a somewhat accomplished writer too, because I've got quite a bit of following in Medium. That's something maybe if it's like doing articles, but you also, it's nice. It's like a blog, but you're doing it like a professional article in depth in there.
Yes.
And they have over 100 million users. Just think about that.
That's amazing.
100 million users on Medium.
Well, you know, I wish you nothing but success on all.
Thank you, man.
Ignacio. And most importantly, I want to sincerely thank you for what you've done for this country.
I appreciate it. Thank you, Hal.
Risk you put yourself
and you too. And you too. You risked your life also once you got on it. And that's risky business there, no doubt, especially in foreign countries. And these gangs, these cartels, they don't play. You know that firsthand. And I look forward to hopefully your life story and looking at it in the big screen or Netflix or wherever it makes it.
Okay, folks. Well, that wraps up another episode today. And I'd like to take this moment to thank each and every one of you for taking your time to catch our show. Now, if you like these shows, I would ask that you would please hit like, share, and subscribe. It's so important to us that we get these messages out, and we understand that these are graphic, almost toxic interviews. But, you know, this is the kind of impact that we feel is needed in order to make sure that people understand the significance of the problems that we are confronted within our own country and around the globe. So I'm going to say at this time that I love you all. God bless you all. Hasta luego, y vaya con Dios, and go Victors.